and creating a stench throughout a neighbourhood when being transported. This is a later design by George Lance and Son. You can see the basic pan with the handles, the tight-fitting lid with a latch on it to make sure that nothing's spilt. The Eagle Hawk Board of Health was informed in April 1888 by their assistant inspector and engineer that about 2/3 of the closets are pans, the remainder hole in the ground, and the night soil depot is about a mile from the town. The licensed nightman was not very much employed. He went on to remark that the closet system and night soil collection are very unsatisfactory. 2/3 of the people who have pans empty and bury the night soil in an adjoining yard or garden, and only the other third employ the licensed nightman, and some of these not often enough. He recommended that the dangerous practice of burying night soil in gardens or near dwelling houses be stopped, that all pans should be emptied at least once a week and the contents taken to the night soil depot. He reported that while the depot was odourless, it was prone to occasional flooding, with waters running into Eagle Hawk Creek and onto the Bendigo Creek. Similarly, in January 1888, the Sandhurst Board of Health revealed that out of the 5,500 householders in the city, only 905 employed the night carts. The rest buried night soil in their garden or yards. The City Council contemplated the Hess system, drawing some criticism from residents. One claimed, as a father of 10 children, he had been burying his night soil in his backyard, measuring 1/8 of an acre in size, for 22 years and had never suffered illness as a result. He used sifted wood ashes to cut the excreta. He also challenged the council or Board of Health to find any signs of where he had done so within 5 minutes of him disposing of night soil in this way. The City Council and Board of Health decided to trial the closed pan system and ordered some sample pans and disinfectant from the Hess Sanitary Company in early 1889. When the council was informed that they would have to pay a royalty of 6p per pan, the town clerk denied that this had been mentioned in the early negotiations. Determined to find an alternate manufacturer of the closed pans, he was informed that the Hess Company was taking proceedings against a St Kilda manufacturer to assert their rights to the patented India rubber ring affixed to the lids of the pans. And if this action was sustained, then it was quite probable that the pan manufactured in Bendigo and approved by the board would also infringe the patent. The final price offered by Hess in September 1889 was 4 shillings and 8p per 100 pans, which the council seemed hesitant to accept. They did, however, agree in September 1890 to purchase 5,000 pans and 1,000 lids, intending to bury the excreta at convenient depots. These trials probably arose from the July 1890 Health Act, which ruled that the ordinary pan system of pans for night soil be abolished and every closet be furnished with a double pan service. At least once a week, pans in use were to be closed with a tight-fitting lid, removed in the daytime in a suitable cart, and councils had the power to make a charge for such services. The removed night soil had to be rendered inoffensive, treated in a destructor, desiccator or incinerator, or trenched or ploughed into land. Stringent supervision had to be exercised by councils over all places of deposit, and individual householders could not contract for the removal of night soil except under the council's bylaws and regulations. Bendigo's night soil collection problems may have been resolved, but for the time being, but the burning question of where it could be deposited remained. In September 1889, Herbert Keck's offer to receive night soil and city refuse from the City Council at a rate of £3 per month for 6 months was accepted. This site adjoined Retreat Road at One Tree Hill in the Shire of Strathfieldsaye, where Keck had an orchard. By June 1891, Keck's depot was causing concern, and the Strathfieldsaye Council took legal action against Keck for illegally disposing the city's excrement, which was said to be destroying one of the district's best picnic spots. Keck was fined £2 plus costs. With Keck's gates closed to the nightmen to avoid further prosecution, the City Council had to cease the collection of night soil until they could resolve the matter with the Shire Council or find a more suitable site within the city boundaries. As one reader of the Bendigo Advertiser had written in February 1890, it was illegal to let a pan overflow. But if the nightmen were not collecting the pans and the property owner buried the night soil in the garden instead, that too was illegal. It seemed like anyone or everyone could be deemed a lawbreaker when it came to Bendigo's night soil. An answer finally emerged in 1892. In August 1891, the city asked the Victorian government for a reservation of 100 acres of land west of Wellsford State Forest for a sewage farm and night soil depot. Being unable to find a suitable site within the city boundaries, the proposed Wellsford depot was in the Shire of Strathfieldsaye, and thus their cooperation was required. The site was approved, and in November the city's town clerk wrote to the Department of Lands and Survey requesting the site at Wellsford be surveyed and reserved from occupation. The Shire of Strathfieldsaye confirmed in December that it would not object to the proposed depot on condition that by February 1892 the city discontinued operations at Keck's depot, took all reasonable care in transporting night soil to avoid creating a nuisance, and restricted its sanitary operations to the Wellsford site. Upon agreement, a draft indenture was drawn up in early 1892 between the city and the Shire, and in March the reservation of 127 acres site for the sewage farm and manure depot, which is the blue area on the plan there, was gazetted. This site is located at what is now the Bendigo Airport, north of Victor Road. A 221-acre extension adjoining the original site, the area in yellow, was gazetted in 1894. With a large depot secured, the City Council began to issue long-term contracts for a citywide pan service. Bolt and Svenosio were awarded the contract in 1895. In July 1898, Henry Carr, an experienced sanitary contractor of North Brighton, was awarded a 5-year contract for the removal, cartage and washing of cesspans and trenching in of night soil, for the total sum of nearly £13,000. The council recording that since the last contract had been issued, the number of pans had increased from 13,900 to 15,300. As part of his contract, Carr had to provide all horses, harnesses, lights, oil, etc., drivers, additional labour, and also stabling and sheds. The council provided the cesspans, rubber rings, disinfectant, water, vans and carts, but Carr had to maintain them. The specification included conditions such as maintaining a civil and respectful demeanour to all ratepayers. Drivers employed must be active, able-bodied men, and assistants had to be aged 18 or over. There were fines for non-compliance or any loss or damage due to gates or doors being left open, neglecting to report leaky or damaged pans, or neglecting to wash vans and carts every trip. The vehicles provided by the council were 11 vans carrying 60 pans, 1 van carrying 32 pans, and 1 spring cart carrying 12 pans. The council wanted to vary Carr's contract in 1900 at an additional cost of £3,900 per annum. It caused discontent amongst the council and the public. The variation exceeded the £100 limit above which any contract had to be submitted for public competition. And by adding new clauses to the specification, it was deemed to be a new contract. Fresh tenders were called in July 1900, and Henry Carr was once more awarded the contract, this time at a cost of £26,500 for a period of 7 years. The key difference was that previously the contractor's obligation extended to the removal of the cesspans, but under the new contract, Carr also had to supply the materials. With the growing cost of carrying the can to provide a clean and hygienic landscape for its ratepayers, the City Council eventually sought alternative methods. This took the council down the eventual path of a sewerage scheme, but other changes to the Bendigo landscape took place first. Septic tanks, which are still present in large parts of rural and regional Victoria, rely upon the natural digestion of human waste by microbes in an enclosed underground tank, with the resulting effluent water being relatively clean. Most septic tanks are connected to flushable toilets in a modern-day sense. Bendigo Council was considering a septic tank system in 1904. Some of the earliest proposed uses of septic tanks in the Bendigo district were in the Elmore Township drainage works in the Shire of Huntly and St Aidan's Orphanage in Grassy Flat, both in 1905. Still navigating the ever-changing legal minefield of managing human excrement, in 1906 the City Council sought legal advice on whether septic tanks were permitted in the city. Under the 1890 Health Act, septic tanks were deemed to be cesspools, which of course were prohibited. The consensus was that so long as they regulated the approval, installation and maintenance of the tanks, then the council had the power to admit their construction. The city surveyor presented draft regulations for the control of septic tanks to a meeting of committee of the City Council in January 1907. The committee recommended acceptance by the council. These developments in managing night soil also created new opportunities for local people and industries. By January 1909, a septic tank had been installed in Nankervis's ham and bacon factory in Golden Square, which it was hoped would remove all causes for complaint. In March 1911, Langley & Co had recently opened a factory in Wattle Street and were making septic tank sewage systems. The new TB sanatorium planned for Spring Gully in 1911 wanted to use the treated water from the proposed septic tanks to grow vegetables and thus prevent effluent from leaving the property and entering the water supply race, which was nearby. The council had objected to the sanatorium proposal due to concerns over potential pollution of the local water supply. However, they were satisfied that the septic tank system would work, and the site was approved and reserved in April 1913. There are contemporary mentions of proposals to use treated septic tank outflow water for human drinking purposes, which suggests the benefits of septic tanks may have been overstated. The septic tank was eventually widely accepted in the Bendigo district. The Borough of Eaglehawk Council minutes between 1960 and 1973 include lists of Eaglehawk ratepayers from which the borough had abandoned attempts to recover the sanitary charge, the major reason being that properties were connected to the sewerage. Over those 14 years, at least 550 properties were sewered, resulting in the borough's septic tanks and pan collection service becoming obsolete. Bendigo was taking the next big step in responsibly managing its night soil. Investigations made by the City Council in 1877 suggested there was insufficient gradient through the Bendigo Valley to provide the drainage requirement for a sewerage system. In 1901, many years later, the city's town clerk wrote to the Melbourne Metropolitan Board of Works seeking information and advice on the application of sewage to land, based on the board's experience of the early sewage farm. Early sewers adjoining Wade and Booth Streets and Trotters Lane were built in 1901. And by 1903, there was a rudimentary sewer in Hargrave Street near Williamson and Mundy Streets, which was emitting foul gases. A decision on this matter was deferred, more advice on the subject was sought, and in February 1905, it was recommended that the pipes and culverts in Mitchell, Williamson and Bull Streets be reconstructed to take drainage directly to the Bendigo Creek and prevent the sewer gas. A report commissioned in 1905 from Mr. Thwaites, Chief Engineer of the Metropolitan Board of Works, recommended the construction of an extended sewage system for the city, estimated to cost over £320,000. And that's Thwaites' proposed area on the map there of where he thought the sewage works would cover. In 1908, the council was still debating whether to spend more on a broader sewage system or to manage human effluent via private septic tanks at a lower cost. A proposal for the septic tank system was heard in January 1908, and once more a motion was carried to refer the matter to a committee for further consideration. This took place in April, and the idea was generally approved. By 1909, their focus was on managing the whole drainage network, taking into consideration both its water supply and the city's sewerage needs, including large parts of the Coliban water scheme. In February 1910, the Mayor moved that a subcommittee consider and report on taking the first steps towards the introduction of a sewage scheme for the city of Bendigo. The scheme was reported to be immediately prepared in August 1910, but by January 1911 it had stalled again. The next big proposal was the 1912 push to merge the city of Bendigo with the borough of Eaglehawk, Huntly Shire and Kangaroo Flat, referred to as the Greater Bendigo Scheme. This could have enabled more efficient delivery of services, management of resources such as water, and the introduction of public utilities. Thankfully, the residents didn't have to wait until 1994, when this proposed merging of municipal areas actually eventuated, to get their sewage system. A detailed description of a proposed sewage system was published in the Bendigo Advertiser in November 1912. It included toilets inside ratepayers' homes, which were flush cleaned with water, and odours prevented from entering the house through a water-filled U-bend. Water for flushing was to be supplied by cisterns fed directly from the reticulated water supply, or a header tank that would fill when the water pressure permitted. What we would today regard as a Bendigo sewage treatment works was in 1912 planned to be a series of large septic tanks, 100 feet long, 25 feet wide and 7 feet deep. This was to deal with the calculated 180 tonnes of night soil being removed weekly from the whole of Bendigo City in 1912. There was even the idea of using the resulting gases to illuminate the sewage works at night. The whole scheme was estimated to cost £300,000. While some are concerned about the cost of taking action, in November 1912, Dr. Breen spoke to a rally of the Australian Women's National League in Bendigo with other concerns. He believed the greatest municipal sin that Bendigo had committed was the absence of a proper sewage system, and they were paying for that inaction every year through disease. Breen cited the rates of cases and deaths from typhoid in Melbourne before and after the introduction of their sewage system to justify a proper scheme in Bendigo. In 1916, Bendigo City applied to become a sewerage district under the 1915 Sewerage District Act. This led to the proclamation of the district and formation of the Bendigo Sewerage Authority in November 1916. Initially, the city councillors constituted the members of the authority. A loan of £120,000 was ratified, and tenders were called for the Bendigo sewage works in September 1921. 3 areas were to be targeted for the initial stages of the scheme: Central Bendigo, Quarry Hill and Golden Square. By January 1923, 4 miles of Bendigo sewer mains had been completed. By February 1924, 305 houses had been connected. In 1924, 7 areas in the first and second sections were also proclaimed to be sewered, and the sewerage area was further extended in July. Bendigo's sewage scheme finally appeared to be well underway. Then a bad smell, not created by night soil, began to emanate from the Sewerage Authority. A royal commission was held in 1925 after allegations were made by local sewage contractors against officers of the authority and their work in dealing with contracts for house connections. While some were unproven, several allegations were upheld, including improper action by the Sewage Contractors Association and the Sewerage Authority, prevention of competition with respect to contracts to connect houses to the system, and the sewage works were insanitary and inadequate for the proper controlling and management of effluent. This is a damning indictment for the Bendigo Sewerage Authority, but action was taken in 1926 towards correcting the faulty system. In 1927, the authority sought a loan of £36,000 to extend the system to Quarry Hill, and sewage works at Kennington and Golden Square were progressing. The authority was permitted to undertake an 8-month trial of an irrigation scheme, which, if it failed, would require them to commence with upgrading the treatment works with what was called an Imhoff tank system. The irrigation trial appears to have been successful. This was marred by a report in May of that year that the engineer had, under instruction from the chairman, incorrectly released the effluent from May Swamp at the sewage farm into Bendigo Creek. In 1928, more sewerage areas were declared to be sewered and plans for Reticulation Area 3 at Golden Square were made public. The same year, the boundaries of the Bendigo Sewage District were redefined, and in 1929, ironbark was added. Back in January 1913, concerns were raised that the current water mains would need enlarging and water pressure increased if the elevated parts of the city were to receive sufficient water for a sewage scheme. These concerns were demonstrated to be genuine in 1930, when a shortage of water supply rendered some parts of the scheme inoperative. The authority reached out to the Minister for Water to provide a remedy. Keeping in mind that the primary purpose of the Bendigo Council working to manage human excrement was to provide public health benefits, in 1937 the authority reported that typhoid fever had almost been eliminated due to the sewage scheme. Case numbers in 1923 were reported to be 353 with 58 deaths. But in the succeeding 10 years to 1933, there had been only 29 cases and 8 deaths in total. With that level of success, it is no wonder that parts of Strathfieldshire Shire were added to the scheme in 1949. The sewage district was once more expanded in 1956 to include Kangaroo Flat, portions of Strathfieldshire, St Just Point, Springay, Flora Hill and Eaglehawk. It was reported that there were still 1,700 houses in the Bendigo sewerage area that relied upon pan collection. By February 1961, a further 41,000 linear feet of sewage, covering areas in West Bendigo, Denham Gully, Eaglehawk, Comet Hill, Strathfieldshire and Kangaroo Flat, had been added to the system in the previous 12 months, with a further extension to the grassy flat area sought in 1962. The introduction of sewage systems also triggered cultural changes with respect to toilets and toilet usage. With flushable toilets came the manufacturing and use of toilet paper. The cut-up squares of newspaper tied with a string and hung on a nail in the outdoors non-flushable dunny were not suitable for the modern sewage networks. In 1951, a global shortage of paper created a shortage of toilet paper in Australia. Who'd have thought that? Shortage of toilet paper. With manufactured toilet paper came toilet roll holders as interior fittings to houses. With the incorporation of U-bends into toilet bowl designs, toilets also began to move indoors. And that's a 1901 design for a bowl, and you can see the old system up above with the pull chain method of flushing the toilet up there, and I can remember those toilets at school in the 1970s. Indoor toilets had been a feature of some large buildings such as hospitals prior to 1900. However, the installation of toilets within houses was very much a result of proper sewage works. The authority were experiencing problems in 1974 and requested the sewage treatment works be moved, but this was rejected by the Minister for Water Supply due to the anticipated cost. Modern equipment was the alternative offered to solve the problems. The need for a new site was finally recognised, and the first stage of the authority's $500,000 improvement program was completed on December the 31st, 1974, when a new aeration complex and settling pond at Meadow Farm, Epsom, were used for the first time. A laboratory and control room were added to the new facility, and this was officially opened in 1984. The same year, the authority changed its name to the Bendigo Water Board. The new works in Howard Street were officially opened in July 1991, and in 2021 was receiving and treating sewage for about 110,000 people in the Bendigo region, which equates to 47,000 connections, in addition to receiving septic tank waste from rural areas. In 1992, the Bendigo Water Board became part of what is now known as Coliban Water. The old Wellsford plant is now the Bendigo Airport. The Bendigo City Council ceased to carry the can for local sanitation services many years ago. but they are ultimately responsible for the district reaching the goal of good health through good sanitation, albeit via a rather tortuous and often odorous path. A more recent problem has been the introduction of so-called flushable wipes, which may indeed be flushable, but do not disintegrate in the way that toilet paper does and subsequently create blockages. We now have a good sanitation system, and the least we can do is take care of it, so we don't have to return to the bad old days of manure depots in our backyards. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, tonight, and thank you to the library staff for supporting this tonight and for La Trobe University. And before we move on to questions, by turning up tonight, you'll have the right to take home some free toilet paper offered by Coliban Water. They're trying to get their message across. There's only 3 P's that go down to the toilet: pee, poo, and paper. And please help yourself afterwards.
And is this connected to an exhibition, or is that flushed or not?
Oh, we were aiming to do that, but we just
So we thought about that.
just a reminder, the actual research, the actual paper that I put together with all the original references actually is now on the BRAC website with the hyperlink up the top there if you want to go and have a look at that under the heading of Carrying the Can. Coliban Water's Facebook page has some posts from November last year about some local recollections of dunny cans and nightmen. There's an interesting article in Public Record Office's Provenance Journal about dating cesspools or cesspits. And we have a couple of books in the library about toilets and night can collections. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan. That's a really fascinating topic. Maybe I'll just, is it questions waiting on YouTube or not yet?
Not yet.
Right, perfect. So I will open up the floor to questions. If anyone's got, yeah, we've got a couple. I'll go over here first. If you just get to the top. Oh, where's Grass and Flats? The question?
Okay, it's the slightly western side of Bendigo, heading out towards, just sort of thinking out, St Aidan's Road area.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just a geography question, I think.
Yeah, hi. I understand that the Chinese people during the gold rush used to collect and plough human waste in and then grow vegetables.
That's correct.
In the
yes.
area like Peppergreen Farm. Is there much written about that in the archives?
I haven't really seen a lot about that written in the archives. It certainly gets reported in the newspapers, the Trove newspapers. You can find references to that. And it's not just Bendigo. I found references to going on down places near Kyneton as well. It was generally frowned upon, primarily too because there wasn't necessarily the regulation to control its use, and then you still had the same overflow and stench problems happening in various places. So that's where you get the reports in the newspapers when people started complaining about it, and that's where you find out where it was going on. Yeah.
Thanks. Susan, I missed about hospitals. When did they have indoor toilets? Like, how did they manage?
That's a good question. I did find references to cisterns in toilets well before 1900. I didn't sort of note the specific date of it. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, sorry. No, I did find references to the local hospitals having cisterns inside well before 1901. I didn't notice the date, but I was picking up references in the Bendigo Advertiser in Trove through that process of hospitals, the local hospital as well, having cisterns and other toilets, indoors toilets, well before then, because they were also looking at the septic tank system as well. But Trove's a great place if you go after a particular hospital to actually pick up some of those references. That's how I was able to find most of them myself.
So that was the opposite or the flushable water system?
Some flushable stuff, but I think they're also installing indoors earth closets as well.
Okay, with questions.
I haven't got a question, but I was saying a little earlier that I remember the Nightman. We used to, my sister and I used to have a bedroom on the side of the house, and he would come down with an empty can on his shoulder and go down to the outhouse at the very back of the house, which they all were. And then he would actually carry the full one on his shoulder back to he had an open tray truck, really old one. We were one of the last places in the Bendigo area in Eagle Hall to actually have the sewerage on. So yeah, that was in the 1970s. So it was good to be part of that era.
That actually was going to be my question, was when it finished, because I was thinking back to the UK and I was thinking, I remember, certainly my grand, so certainly 30s and 50s, yeah, maybe into the 60s. It was a long time before my grand, well, it was probably 80s because you had an indoor toilet, but, and anything like flush, any bath, bathroom. So it was still a tin bath, even when I remember. But you just made me think of someone I was talking to saying about, I'm sure it was about a nightsoil man, and they tripped in the alley when they were they left a bike or something, and they did this almighty crash. And they suddenly thought, was that you I was talking to? Someone had a great memory about that. That would be quite something. So,
I can remember that at my grandmother's house. Yeah. At my grandmother's house, the guy carrying the full can, and I don't know how he did it without spilling anything, because it would have been really heavy.
They did have lids.
Did they?
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear they did have
That,
roads.
not in my memory.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
Some of them, well, we saw that. I mean, it was a beautiful picture of the technology that you had.
Oh,
Hands.
I just presumed it was the same as when it was in the little house.
Yeah.
Only,
And I think what struck me was when you were talking about people burying the waste in their gardens, because in urban cities in the UK that just wasn't an option. So everybody had the nightsoil. Was it expensive to pay? You might have said it and I just missed it, but I hadn't really thought about people paying the nightsoil man. So they decided not to and just bury it in their own grounds. When I wouldn't know what the situation was in the UK. I imagine it was council funded, probably because it just everybody had to have it.
that was the general trend, that councils eventually picked up those services. So I saw references to people having to pay more than a shilling a week just to have their can emptied, and most people were saying that's just, it wasn't economically viable for them.
Yeah, that would have been expensive for some people. Any more questions in the room?
I missed the start, but is that the expression carrying the can, is it referring to?
Yeah, some great puns also in your talk. I don't think you didn't milk that enough. There were some fabulous puns, but yeah, carrying the can.
I quite enjoyed
fantastic.
odorous journey.
Yeah, the odorous was nice. Do you really? It was fantastic. Well, we are getting near to the end. There's no questions on
I think
YouTube.
it's a pity that they changed Coliban water and it could have stayed the Bendigo Water Board Authority or something.
I think they should have kept the Bendigo name in there. Well, just as we're getting to the end, it's just a bit of a chance to publicise our next session, which is in April, the 28th of April, connected to Anzac Day on that Monday. And this is, I've written this down properly. It's called Immortals, the presentation, the study of digger monuments in Victoria. Should be a great session because we'll have a local artist, Clayton Tremlett, talking to us that day, and he's got an exhibition connected to this, and also a La Troy PhD student, Liv Kenny. That is baby permitting. So yeah, hopefully we'll have a great double act next time in April. And yeah, thanks again, Susan, for a fantastic presentation. Just so much to think about, and thanks everyone for attending both here and online as well. Thank you.
Feel free to
And take some paper. It's not quite as good as the chocolate session, I have to say. I think I like the chocolate freaking.
It's happy.
Oh.